Roll up, roll up. See the future stars of rock. Watch 3 live bands, magic tricks, guitar masterclasses. Be entertained by card shufflers, chord shufflers, and note makers. In the awesome surroundings of the Weald of Kent, under the big top of this kingdom, your chance to be entertained or even win a BC Rich guitar. On the 12th of March, starting at 3:30 through to 7:30 at the wonderful Kingdom near Penshurst, we will be doing a fundraising event for the Akara Music to enable young people to learn to play the guitar and write songs. Be sure to be there. Numbers are limited. Follow the link in the show notes on the Eventbrite.
So today I'm going to be talking to Sian Sibley. Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining me. Right. Okay. Traditional first question, Sian. What do you do?
I am a very eclectic bag of madness, really. I run a coven in South Wales called DragonOak. We're a traditional witchcraft coven. We do things ranging from working with plant spirits, working with Hecatean ritual from the PGM. We work a lot of spell work, actual magical work, because I'm a great believer if you don't use magic, you lose the ability to do magic. We offer training to students that are looking for somewhere to call home. And we do a lot of ritual around the moon cycles and Sabbats and all that sort of stuff. So busy.
Cool stuff. Now, I like to sort of explore where your interests come from, because obviously with anything, I'm assuming, it doesn't just sort of pop out of nowhere. Well, there are some cases when I've talked to people, whether they're, interested in the sort of, do what you do, or whether they're musicians or whatever, the sort of roots of it go right back in your life. So what's your first sort of recollections of things where you started to think, oh, that's odd, what's going on?
I've got a very odd way of coming into it, because my grandfather on my father's side, because Sibley is my father's name, was a Pentecostal preacher. Okay, and he came from a long line of Pentecostal preachers that came up from Somerset in the 1700s, following a little bit of a Pentecostal cult that set up in the Welsh valleys. Okay, and his view on what deity was, what divinity was so set and so, I don't know, it was hypocritical. I always remember my grandfather. He was a great worker in the community, and he took blankets out on a cold Christmas Eve, but wouldn't give them to the people in the street until the journalist had come to see.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, exactly. that was very much what my grandfather was like. And what happened to me was I obviously went to chapel with my father and mother. Weren't really chapel goers, but I went to chapel for my grandfather and my grandmother. And it didn't do anything for me at all. In fact, it made me feel quite against what that sort of church stood for.
That's interesting.
I was a great horse girl when I was younger. I was only about 11, and I would literally ride for miles. And it just struck me that living in the natural world, where you were within nature rather than worshipping a divinity that was apart from nature, is where it was for me. And I started investigating, and I always remember when I was about 12, I come from a really rhondda town called Tonorefel, and they had a lovely little prefabricated library. And I went to the library one day and I just came across a book on witchcraft, which was the Farrar book, What Witches Do. And it was nothing like I thought I was doing at the time. But I always remember that I was so excited about finding this book on witchcraft that I nicked it.
Oh my gosh.
On my shelves now. And I remember
Amazing.
that ultimate guilt sneaking
Yes.
out with this book stuck under my coat.
That's awesome, isn't it? That's sort of real taboo breaking
But I couldn't
initiation.
have taken it out, because if my grandfather had found out, he'd kill me. You know, so I had to, it was literally sealed. And it, like you say, it was nothing like I was practicing, but it was just something that I thought, oh, do you know what? That's really interesting.
So you're saying you were already practicing?
Yeah.
So let's get back to that, because that's something interesting.
A little 11-year-old, I would do things like I would talk to my horse. I would sit in my window, and these days you would say cast spell, but those days I would say it was making wishes when I was little.
Yes.
And very often those things came to be.
Ah, right. Yeah.
It is, there is that old mythology, isn't there, about the power of a teenage girl.
Yes.
That understanding of that they don't know what they're doing, but they have the power to do it, which is...
Yes, that is very true. It is an interesting thing, actually. I'll tell you this. Because I grew up in Cornwall, so it was always, it was always sort of in clear sight that there was something going on. People would talk about things in particular ways, and it was fairly normal. But I was sort of interested in stuff like meditation and stuff. So when my kids were growing up, they obviously saw me meditate and talk about things, and I rather thought they weren't really sort of involved in any sort of way until one of my daughters actually said something to me, which, a bit like you're saying. She said, because I had twins. I had four girls, but the youngest were twins. And one of them said, yes, we Livy and I, that was her sister, we do things like we would stop eating chocolate until this thing that we wanted happened. And I thought, so they were doing this, like you're saying, it was like a natural thing.
You haven't got a clue what you're doing, you just do
Exactly.
My mother always used to say that. She always claims I was a very weird child, but as she said, when I was really little, I would look out the window of the car when we were driving home at night and go, look at the moon, Mum, look at the moon. And if there was a puddle, I'd say, oh, two moons. But so I honestly believe, that it's something that you are born into. With that, I don't believe in any of this stuff about witch blood and shit like that. But it is something that your spirit leans towards. And I honestly, one of the things I always say to my girls is, and this I don't know whether this applies to everybody, but it applies to most of the people that I train or that I work with, is that if you are an astrologer and you believe that you are born into sort of the Platonic schema of astrology, where you're born into a life to learn a lesson, what I tend to find is that people who are attracted to the craft have a hole in their lives somewhere. They will have a poor childhood, they'll have a bad relationship with their parents, something will happen to them that gives them a hole that makes them search, and then finding something like craft will fill that hole for them. And that's what the drive is, to look, because the Christian, what the difference between paganism, witchcraft and Christianity is, Christianity gives you what you are allowed to believe, whereas paganism allows you to form your own ideas of what the divine is and what the universe is speaking to you directly. And I'm an animist, so I really do believe that the gods and goddesses are speaking to us with the voice of the universe. We're living a living organism, so it's really interesting to see the different approaches. And I love the fact that you can ask 20 pagans what they believe and you'll have 20 answers. I think that's fantastic.
Yes, because obviously, because again, you've only got to go outside in nature and pick a stone up and look underneath it, and it's absolutely teeming with life. And you sort of go, well, obviously, nature is absolutely infused with life. So
the
So,
very,
so
very sad thing for me is that if you read proper Christian tradition, that is in the Bible. Turn a piece of wood and you will find, pick a piece of rock and I am there. You know, where did they lose that? Do you know what I mean?
I think this is interesting because obviously with a lot of the work I do, because I'm dealing with sort of creativity and teaching that to, allowing younger people to keep that creativity in the sort of education system, right? Because it gets sort of drilled out of people.
Yeah, I'm a biology teacher myself, and I hate it. I hate
exactly. So you get the idea of what you got. This sort of the left side of the brain starts to, want the answer, want this, and it's map building, but then it believes in the map.
Yeah.
And the problem is that most things are literally unknowable because they're so complex.
Yeah.
And like you're saying there, I think that's probably where it gets lost. It's this thing of wanting to have an answer, when in actual fact, it's only a map, so the answer's not really an answer. It's just a way of navigating,
I think the other thing that always makes me smile about particularly science is that, in the medieval times, science was seen to be anti-God.
Yes.
Now, as a scientist myself, I got a master's degree in medical genetics. We as scientists are now saying, well, no, nothing you believe is true because everything can be proven. And there's so much that can't be. It's so anthropocentric and dominated by this idea that we are the top of the evolutionary chain.
Yes, I know, and that, which is absolutely ridiculous, really, isn't it? If you sort of step back and look at this and think, this idea that, and again, this is very sort of, logical side of the brain where you take everything out of context.
Yeah, yeah.
And of course, as soon as you take something out of context and you take it out of its environment that it exists in, it can't survive. So the hard idea of putting something into a laboratory system and then, trying to prove something works is unsound. So, when you're saying about, being an animist, obviously we're living in an organism.
Yes, yeah.
The
mere fact that the world supports life tells you that the world is alive, because dead things, unless you consume them, don't support life. I don't know.
No, it's exactly. I get that totally.
Sort of frustration for me, and there's quite a few. Weirdly enough, in DragonOak, we've got quite a few scientists, and it's really interesting when we talk about the fact that I can dissect an animal, I can take it apart and tell you how it works, but I can't tell you what it is that actually works that animal, what the spirit is, what it's experiencing.
Yes. Yes.
What science doesn't understand, and it pushes it aside in order to be scientific. It says, well, it's alive or it's dead. Well, what makes it that way?
Exactly. No, that's fascinating because again, I come from the sort of musical perspective of things. Because you can do the same thing with any form of art, where you can sort of look at the components of something, but you don't really know what the essence of that thing that makes it work is. Because you could look at a song and pull it apart and then put it back together again and go, well, actually, that's none of those things. There's an essence to it, a soul to a song, or soul to a piece of artwork, or a soul to a story, or whatever, that you cannot grasp. And I think that lies.
I honestly believe that the secret of magic, of I hate to call it religion because that's got such an awful ring to it, but philosophy or whatever you live by, if it brings you joy, then it's the thing that you should be doing, and I think that as a people don't do that enough.
I totally agree. And look at how many people do a job that they absolutely hate. Yeah. It doesn't bring them any joy at all.
No, but it brings them money, and they think that money brings them joy. And
I know that's what they think.
That's the heart of it, is
understand.
And I think, I'll be honest, I think one of the things that lockdown taught us, and I was one of these naive people that believe that we would come out of lockdown with all this new idea of community and all this sort of stuff. And in fact, I believe as a community we've come out worse. But it did teach people that they don't need things to live. They don't need much to have a good life. And that's why all of our young people now are saying, no, fuck that for a game of conkers. I'm not doing that work. And they can't get people to do work. So
no. That's fascinating, because certainly we spotted that with things like, catering. They can't get the people now.
No.
Because a lot of people think, I'm not doing that anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And it's suddenly become time and experience has become more important than money.
That's interesting. That's fascinating. Yeah. So anyway, we've got to this point where you've sneaked off with this book out of the library.
Yes.
and you've obviously, this sort of clandestine use of magical input from the stolen book, which is, I think, is brilliant. Initiation.
The weird thing is I can't say that I used anything from the book. It was
but it was the process of taking the book, wasn't it?
Yeah, and making you feel that there were other people doing stuff out there.
Oh yes, yeah. I think that's really important when you realise that there are others.
Yes, definitely, because you think on your own for a long time, especially back, like, God, what was that? That was 1970s. So it's a long time ago. And then in the early 1980s, and you've got all of the AOL chats and all that sort of stuff, and you realise that there were people all over the world doing this stuff.
So you were obviously like a lone practitioner then, right? So when do you get to that point? Is it because of the sort of beginnings of the internet that you?
Yes, yeah. I met up with a lady from America called Rowan, and we were talking, and she was saying about having an understanding of magic, and she gave me a set of lessons, and they were Franz Baden, to be honest with you.
Oh right, yeah.
A lot of Franz Baden training in there, but it just made my creative side open up. And then I started teaching those lessons, but I altered them to come in line with more of what we thought was going on. It sort of, instead of it being, because in Rowan's lessons, it was very much horned god, horned goddess. And we use that, but we tend to think of them as natural spirits. Do you know what I mean? Rather than being goddesses and gods. So it sparked an interest in me in astrology, and I started studying. And then I just had a group of friends that we were touching base in pagan moots and all that sort of stuff. And we just started practicing together. And there's still about 3 of them that practice with me now. And DragonOak is about, must be 27, 28 years old now. And then others of my group have gone out to make their own way in the world and do other things and open other covens. And so it's been really good. And one of the things that we do is we run, it used to be 1, but it's 2 now because it's breeding, the Welsh Occult conference in Welshpool.
Yes.
And the Cardiff that has just started now. So we're having our second one in October this year. And that's really popular. And one of the things that I like to do is to try and make things as accessible for people so that they know the community is out there. The only thing that I haven't been able to do successfully is run a moot, because it seems to be in Wales. There's a really lovely one that Karen Rainbird runs in Pontypridd, which is brilliant. But everywhere else, there seems to be real difficulty running physical moots. Online ones seem to go okay, and the conferences really go well. But the moot side of things seems to have died off, apart from parents. So you do need something for people to know that they're not on their own, and the internet is a massive part of that. I mean, we run online workshops and that sort of stuff, and people will come and have a little go and learn and have some fun, and it's really good to get together with people. And I think, although individual solitary magical practice is really powerful and in some ways can be more focused than coven work, it's the community side of it that is really good for coven, and the celebration side of it.
So the thing is, you talk about COVID.
Oh, yeah.
I think one of the things that came out of that is, again, this keeps coming up in conversation. This sort of, two sides of the brain and two sides of what we think we are. We're obviously wired up to be social creatures, but we think we're individuals.
Yeah.
And I think, again, that sort of does, you think of the right side of the brain, it does that sort of big holistic thing. We can contemplate being part of this sort of extraordinary whole, and we can contemplate unbelievable things, but we can't intellectualize them. So there's that, and the intellect likes to just pull everything apart and whatever. So this that sort of individual, we want to be an individual, but really we're wired up to be social. And of course, I think Covey was an interesting perspective on that, because we had these ridiculous things where people were dying alone. Which, to be honest, was a horrendously appalling situation where people couldn't attend a funeral of somebody. I mean, that was a ridiculously inhumane situation.
Yes.
And for what, really? I mean, okay, we can look back at it and go, but even at the time, you was thinking that's just not on. And we never did that, even when we had plagues before, people were being buried and whatever. But it was like you didn't just leave people. It was extraordinary. And I think that's another thing that we, the idea of sociability, and again, context, putting things in context, making you realise that you're not alone in whatever way you think.
The hang-ups with COVID, though, is that people have found it incredibly hard to re-emerge from it. Because I find that, if I'm running things like study nights, or I'm running, that people will, and I find it myself, we were making a joke of it last study. I love a cancellation. It's far easier now to just stay in the house because we're used to that now.
Yes.
But I do that, the communities will die. It is really important to support things like camps and conferences and this sort of stuff, and support each other. And I think one of the things that paganism is famous for is that there is a tendency to have a bit of tall poppy syndrome.
Yes.
Yes. Like in Wales now, we have Mara Starling that just published a lovely book on Welsh, and some things that are being said about her they're not aimed at her scholarly effects.
No.
Practice. They're aimed at her personally,
and
that's disgraceful. That shouldn't happen.
No, but it does. You are right, because that does happen. But it's not just to do with that sort of community, but it happens everywhere, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Artists
anybody. I mean, it's quite. It's sad in a way, because we should be those people that are coming into the mainstream, particularly. Because they're opening doors for us. Whereas, in the 1980s, if you mentioned the word witchcraft or you mentioned the word paganism, that was it. You lost all your friends.
Yes.
You could.
Yes.
Don't have that anymore, which is wonderful. I'm quite openly pagan in my school, and that's a massive step forward. I've been teaching now 20 years, and before about 5 years ago, no, you wouldn't have come out. But there's lots that are coming into school, and they're wearing like pentagrams, or they're wearing crystals, or so there's obviously a movement towards that way of thinking. And yes, some of it is fashion, but it's really good that our younger people are coming into it with a much more open idea than we did.
So this brings me to the point then, because we got to you with the book, and then we sort of went off on a tangent. When did you start to become sort of openly, to your own family? Because I could imagine that could have been a bit.
Always been.
Oh, okay. So because I could imagine that, the thing with the grandparents could have been a bit tricky.
My grandparents, I didn't really have much to do with them. My other side of my grandparents were really open to. They're both atheists. But if you listen to my grandmother talking, my grandmother was atheist with a pagan leaning.
Yes, no, I get that. Yeah.
You would never have known that, because her family. And it's very odd with my grandmother's family because she was one of 14 children, 2 of which died at childbirth. And her parents didn't use biblical names, and they were called things like Harvest and Merlin.
Oh, right, blimey.
Yeah, there were there's loads of that.
Oh, okay.
My grandmother's maiden name is Webb, okay? And they were very, very, like, they never went to chapel, they didn't do any of that. So I think she never was pagan, but I always remember her once telling me a story when I was a little girl about the woman that brought the spring, and the fact that she walked over the mountain with the flowers on her cloak, and she left the flowers behind her as she walked. And for me, when I heard things like that, when she was old, and I was old enough to understand, and I had context, you think, hang on a minute, what's going on?
Yeah.
I had a very odd, and like I say, my family, we had our difficulties when I was younger, and it sort of pushed me towards that way of thinking where I questioned everything, which was, I thought was really valuable when I was younger, and I still value that now, because I think one of the things I get on everybody's nerves in the group, because I can't do a ritual without knowing where that ritual has come from. And for me, the PGM are really important because they've got that basis of Hecatean, particularly, worship. And you can see it in they use the invocations for some very nefarious purposes, but you can adjust it and use it for worshipful or magical practice, you know. So, and interestingly for you, there is so much work in the PGM on the tonal correspondences with planets and with you know, the vowel sounds and the musical notes associated with that. It's amazing stuff. It's really important. You know?
Because obviously, you know, we've also got to this point where words are, you know, they're words, but of course they're not words, are they? You know, and obviously intonation of words. I do a lot of NLP stuff, you know. So they put a lot of emphasis on tonality, obviously, because if you're trying to, you know, if you're using hypnosis, you've got to use the right tonality, you've got to use the right pacing, and of course, it's sort of strange because it's obvious when you're communicating with people and using sound. It's not just the words. Well, it is the words, but it's also the context the words are in. Yeah.
I think, like what we use, I don't know, have you ever heard of the heptagram or the heptosphere? We find that is really, really forceful in if you're doing any sort of astrological work. As you're doing the work, you're intoning that vowel at the right note, and it adds. It's sort of like adding to the vibration of the magical work there. So,
No, it's interesting that. Okay, so we skirted across a few things here because you mentioned the Welsh Occult conference that you run. So how long have you been doing that?
Well, it started off, Gary Nottingham, an alchemist from, he's living up in Welshpool now, started the conferences in Ludlow years and years and years ago. And they were the first conferences I ever went to as a sort of baby occultist. And they were always this wonderful mix of practice and theory, okay? And he had some wonderful guests, but he moved it then to Welshpool. And sadly, about 2 years ago, his wife fell quite ill. So he asked me if I'd take it over. Of course, the first time we were supposed to do it was the 2020, so we had to cancel because of COVID. But last year we had our kickoff one, and that went really well. And then people were asking me then why nothing ever happens like that down in South Wales, because we used to have Witch Fest down here.
Yes, I've heard of this. Yeah, I've never been to.
No, it didn't carry on after COVID. So we put the very quickly organised one in August last year for Cardiff in the Masonic Hall, and that went really well as well. So we're going to give it another try this year. So it's all down to Gary Nottingham, really, because he actually started it all off.
It's interesting because I think, have you got Jack Hunter with you?
Yes.
This year, because I interviewed Jack. It must have been about a year or so ago. Because I'd heard him a few times, on different podcasts,
I studied the MA Spirituality and Ecology, and he was one of the main lecturers on that.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely brilliant. So I thought, you know what, he'd be perfect.
Yeah. He's a fascinating guy. Yeah.
But I think the thing that struck me the most when we were the first lecture we had was I sat there and just thought, oh, good grief, he's a baby. Because he looks so young, doesn't he?
Yes, he does. Well, he is actually quite young, isn't he?
He is absolutely brilliant. Fair play. He's really, really good.
Yeah. He's done some amazing work of just sort of researching and being able to put that stuff,
Doing the ontology of occultism. So I'm going to grab him for a few more as well, if he doesn't get fed up with me nagging him.
That's good. So, what would you say then about how can I put this? The landscape so the landscape of occultism in Wales, because Wales is always that sort of, if you don't live in Wales, one of those sort of places that's quite mysterious anyway. It seems to be impossible to get from one place to another in Wales without spending an entire day driving.
Yeah, that's true.
So in that way, it's still got that mystique of it being distant.
I think the difficult thing in Wales, it's got a very, very active occult scene at the moment. There are lots and lots of different areas that you can investigate. Chris Hughes' stuff in Anglesey with the Druids is wonderful. We are operating. There's lots of active covens down here as well, and a lot of people you don't know about because they're still in the closet. The difficulty that you have in Welsh, and Chris will kill me for saying this now, because we did a study probably about 3 years ago now as a group to see if we could construct ritual from the Mabinogion. Okay.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Because it always seems really weird to people that we are Hecatean and we use a lot of Greek in our rituals. And I really wanted to see if we could get a bit closer to home and find if we could construct something that would allow us to practice. And it's incredibly difficult because a lot of the stuff in the Mabinogion is actual, almost like historical text. And then the magical side of it is really hidden in things like Celach Olwyn and things like that. And it's difficult to get to the bottom of it. I found the Mabinogion harder to read and interpret than the PGM. So it's I don't know. I'd love to do more active. I mean, we work with like land elementals and plant spirits and stuff in our area, and we use a lot of material because we try and work ecologically from the areas. Like we don't use crystals. We'll go and look for hagstones and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Actually constructing Welsh ritual is really hard. And besides, I don't speak Welsh because on my grandmother's side, they spoke Welsh, but as I said, they were one of 14. And what they did was Gran and Grandpa spoke Welsh to each other and spoke English to the children. So they had a little bit of privacy because they lived in like a little 2-bedroom house. So we lost that. And it is something that I would like to learn more about. And there's a lot of work going on at the moment. I know that there's a really good course in Trinity St. David's at the moment about sacred geography with Bernadette Brady. And that is piquing my interest at the moment. So I might sign up for that. And that's but,
it's interesting. You see, here's a point. I was talking about Cornwall. Because there's a lot of things in sort of Cornish fairy tales where you just sort of, you only have to sort of squint at it and think, oh, okay, there's something there. There's a little thread that obviously has some sort of magical leaning. Obviously we're talking about interaction with the sort of fairy lore and how things like the gifting of music or whatever, and you sort of if you sort of reverse engineer that, you can sort of think, right, okay, there's something in the connection with, let's put it for, with the natural world that gives you that essence of what it is to be musical. And again, you could look at stuff with the jinn and stuff, and it's very, very similar. things. But it is a case of like, it's sort of hidden in plain sight, but backwards somehow.
It's talk about synchronicity, because our new area of study in the Coven is working with the Fae, and we're looking at things like Kirks, goblins, elves, and fairies, but I want to get a set of the Andrew Lang books, because there's a
okay.
lore in there that's hidden away in fairy tales, and I'm desperately trying to find on eBay at the moment reasonably priced Andrew Lang books. But like Welsh fairy tales, you know, things like Tum Tum Catty and all that sort of stuff, they are available. It's just a case of getting through the sort of the getting the ones that are not commercialized. That's the interesting one. So
yeah. Because again, it's, you know, it's sort of decoding. The same thing with myths, isn't it? Really, you could read something, a myth, or even some sort of like biblical story, especially Old Testament stuff, and then suddenly years later it can suddenly hit you. Meanings that are mostly, you know, multi-layered, and you could read them as all sorts of things. And sometimes they're a reversal of, you know, you take the idea and then you see that it has this meaning over here as well. You know, I think there's a lot of that, and it takes ages to associate yourself to a story, to find the mechanics is probably not the right word, but it's probably the best word I can think of at the moment, of something that that has some sort of I don't know what you call it, some sort of operational spell or alchemy or whatever. So, you know, I'm sort of interested in that from the point of view, if you like, creativity with music and stuff, because it keeps coming back. You know, the story of the great harp player who gets, you know, he's taught to play from the other world, and of course you get that in the blues as well. You know, Robert Johnson, you know, and meeting the dark man at the crossroads and so on. So I do think there's a lot that we could look at and think, well, what is it that happened there? You know, within the story and how much they tell of it.
It's the obvious ones are things like the 12 Dancing Sisters, and the number 12 comes up incredibly, you know, really, really often in fairy tale. 7 comes up really. I mean, I read a really good psychological paper on the Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs being a folklore version of Inanna and the descent into the gates.
Yes, yes, yeah. And of course, you could also think, well, you know, 7 is this sort of interesting thing, colours of the rainbow. It's also, you know, your 7 notes of a scale before it reaches the octave and stuff, isn't it? I mean, there are certain things that resonate all the way through creation on there. I think it's interesting.
Like even things down to Rumpelstiltskin, knowing the name of something, how it gives you the power over it. That sort of
that's a classic one, isn't it?
Amazing one, yeah.
Yes, because that's the thing, isn't it, about names? Again, this takes us back to the PGM, of course. You know, knowing the names of gods or goddesses, and of course, it's not just one name; it will be many names.
But if you study the PGM and you read those barbarous words, they're a combination of sounds. The vowels are appropriate to a planet. The consonants look at the astrological signs and things. So they're really complex little code books, those things are, about when you can work with that particular energy. And they fascinate me. They absolutely fascinate me. And the patterns, you know, you see the same words coming up again, you know, Abrasax and the Zeus de Damna Maneus is always there. There's loads of things, particularly in the Hecatean spells and the Hermes ones as well, that are really, really interesting and can be used for anything. And I really do believe that those barbarous words shouldn't be spoken. I believe they should be sung. I think I really do.
Okay, that's another point. Okay, so because again, this is one of those things where we've separated the idea of poetry and music and all the rest of it. And of course, none of that would have been separated because obviously, if you got the stories of Orpheus,
yes,
all those things were sung, and of course, the bards sang their poems, and you think, well, that sort of tells you something, doesn't it?
It's also it's if you sing something, you will remember it in a different place of the brain, and you
yes,
far more. And when you're in trance or you're in magical work, accessing that song is much easier than trying to remember cold words.
Yes, that is absolutely true. And again, as a musician, it's much easier to learn lyrics than it is to learn a poem, because obviously it attaches itself to a musical aspect. Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think that, again, we obviously arrived at that because of people, disassembling things so we can intellectualize them.
Exactly. And this idea that, and I think, I'm not really sure when it happened, but this idea, the separation of song from magical practice. I tell you what it reminds me of is I went over to the Ritma Museum probably about 8 years ago now to look at the Keys of Solomon and that sort of stuff. And the first thing that absolutely floored me is that they in the manuscripts, they're in colour, and that colour comes at you.
Yeah.
And when you look at the grimoires, they're in black and white.
Yeah.
And honestly, when I went in and I just thought, oh my God. And beautiful, beautiful colours, and the Ripley scroll and all of that, they're all in colour. And we do that because we only see it in printed books that for some reason don't do the colours. Sort of miss half of it out. And it's the same with the songs and intonation and using the voice in a particular way. You'll know that when somebody is taught the Lesser Banishing Pentacle ritual, the first thing they're told is to vibrate the words. And what you end up with is this bastardization where they go, Yod. It's not that. It's a song. You're vibrating it.
It's a song.
It doesn't have to be this forceful thing. You're singing to the divine.
So here's the other thing then. What about movement?
Yes. Well,
because again, we're putting all this back together. So we got your song, you got the words, now you got the music. Now if you had the dance that attached
that's
to that.
where the heptagram comes in, because there are set movements to the heptagram, and you can do it. And the most beautiful example of it was there's a lady that was up in the Glastonbury conference must be about 5 years ago, called Emma Durr, and she and her husband did it, and they did it as a dance. It was just beautiful, the way that they moved, and it was lovely. And there is a lovely lady called Red Elders that does amazing artwork as well as being
yes, I've seen her work. Yeah.
But she runs movement, sort of, what does she call it? Somatic movement.
Yeah.
Where she uses movement, because our ritual, because we've followed the church models really in Wicca, in witchcraft, in Masonicism, they are very static, aren't they? They're very sort of. But if you want to, that's one of the things I love about really good craft ritual is you can move, you can circle, you can dance, to raise that energy. But if you stand still, you're losing that part of it. And if you're dancing and you're singing and you're doing all of that, woo, you're off. It's great.
Interesting. Because I'm thinking of all sorts of things with regard to this, like 5 rhythms and all that sort of stuff. It's obvious that if you've sort of travelled and seen shamans working, they're not sitting still. They're doing stuff. They're playing, singing.
The most beautiful energy movement is the Islamic, the group dancers.
The sort of Sufi.
That's it. But when they do it as a group and they're all together and they're in
Yeah.
that is amazing, you know. And we tend to, as pagans, we ignore that side of things when another religion is doing it because we're anti that religion in some ways, you know. But that side of it we can learn from massively. If we
because obviously the Sufi thing, I think, you know, there's a lot of, you know, there's a lot that they could teach us.
Yes, absolutely.
From that perspective. I mean, particularly that they're obviously not liked by other more orthodox. Well, it's not really orthodox, is it? You know what I mean? You know what I'm sort of saying?
They're very much akin to the old Essenic and Cathar cults in Christianity. It's the Sufis, and it's because of that, because they have that sort of occult knowledge that they're not like. You know, it's like your evangelicals don't like.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm sort of getting at. Yeah, exactly. That's interesting. And we've almost gone sort of full circle on this. You're talking about, you know, your grandparents and that sort of Pentecostal aspect of things. And
I will say, I've been in Pentecostal rituals where the guys have blown the roof off with the.
Oh yeah. I get that. I get that because obviously, because the thing.
My mate who was really into it, and her sitting there thinking, I don't quite know, because she was really rocking and all this sort of stuff. And I'm thinking to myself now, yeah, she was using movements and making her own Christian version of magic, you know. Brilliant.
Yeah, it's amazing. Cool stuff. So I've got to be careful of the time because I've got to dash off to do something else, to, you know, teach a load of kids to be rock stars, which is nice.
Brilliant.
Yeah, that's good. Anyway, that was a brilliant chat, and I'm going to be coming up to Wales anyway when you do.
Okay.
So there's a group.
Come up to the Welshpool conference.
Yeah. We've got tickets and everything. There's a group of people that are coming up, so it'll be good fun. So I'll meet you then.
Yes, definitely.
That's great. So thanks ever so much, Sean. That was a great chat. I really enjoyed that very much.
Thank you.
So I will see you soon, literally.
Yes, I'll see you in Welshpool.
Yeah, cool.